For those, because I didn't have my mic on, please turn your cell phones to a vibrate or just so they don't ring. Thank you very much.
Never bring it. So.
We'll now stand for our national anthem. Okay, Mr. Clerk, introduction of addendum or delegation items this evening?
There are no addendum items this evening, Mr. Mayor, but we have 3 delegations for item 6 this evening.
Okay, thank you. Confirmation of agenda, mover and a seconder. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Desmarais, any questions? All in favor? It's carried. Disclosures of interest. Councillor Walls.
To you, Mayor. Conflict of interest in regards to item number 6.
Well, Councillor, can you just indicate the nature?
The nature would be with regards to the value of my property, whether it would be escalated or reduced as the outcome of this decision. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other disclosures? Adoption of minutes, one set, regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 07-19, held on February the 25th, 2019. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Beauregard. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. I'm looking at you, but I'm seeing Harry's hand. That was the thing. Okay, determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Items 6, 9, and 10.
Councillor Bruno. Councillor Walls.
To you, Mayor. Item number 1, 2, and 3, and 4, but it all has the same question that applies to all of those.
Okay. Councillor Beauregard.
Item 1 and 5.
1 and 5. Okay, councillors. Oh, sorry, Councillor Claylough.
Item number 7, please.
7. Okay. Approval of those items not requiring separate discussion. I move on to seconder. Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bagu. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Presentations. We have one presentation this evening. Fire Chief Tom Cartwright will be presenting a retirement award to David Daisley, volunteer firefighter, Port Colborne Fire and Emergency Services. Chief?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, viewing audience, and the people in the audience here this evening. It's a pleasure for me to be here this evening just to present Dave with something in recognition for his over 20 years of service for the city's fire department. Dave has been an outstanding firefighter for us. I never once have had to send him a letter for poor attendance or have him in my office for anything else other than discussions with regards to the fire department. He's been very helpful and shown some leadership qualities that certainly others should look up to. So we certainly appreciate his service. I'm going to ask yourself and my deputy to come forward, as well as Dave and his wife, please. You really didn't think those flowers were for him, did you? So Dave, on behalf of our fire department, our city's fire department, thank you so much for your years of service and your dedication to the community, the people in the community, and helping the people in the community, as well as the fire department as a whole. And Sarah, thank you so much for your assistance over the years in supporting him. Over the last year or so, Sarah led a bit of a fundraising event for the city's fire department for our fire prevention program in conjunction with the Italian Hall, and supported us with a cash donation of, I think it was somewhere in an area of $2,000 or so, which we very much appreciated. So it's a family event, and we certainly appreciate both of your efforts. But Dave, this evening, thank you so much again. We have several things here for you. One is a bit of a plaque that we've got, and you can hold that up for Terry to take some pictures. Your Worship, get in here. Squeeze in.
David, cut your head up, is it okay?
No problem. And we got you something to take home and put on your mantle, wherever it might be. It's a kind of a nice little keepsake. It's a picture of a firefighter holding a dog and taking care of a child. So we appreciate that. And you want to present that to Sarah? There you go. And of course, last but not least, we make an effort to give our firefighters when they retire the helmet, their active helmet when they retire, the one they've been wearing the day of their retirement. So Dave, thank you so much on behalf of myself and council. We appreciate it. If you want to say a couple words, go for it.
Well, you want to talk first?
No. I'm not a talker, Bill.
No? So when Dave says he's not a talker, I grew up with this guy, so I've known him a long time, and he's not. Until he gets in the dressing room at hockey, after the game, and when he starts going about guys from the other team. That's the only time he does get going on this. But as the chief said, and as the members of our fire service that are here to celebrate this day with us, with David retiring, he's been an asset to this community, an asset to our fire services. So on behalf of council and myself, we thank you very much. And your loving wife, who I've known for a long time, and your family that's here, who we know, and sisters and brothers and brother-in-laws and everybody else that's here for this day. So it is great, and it's good to see the support within our community. So David, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe your wife would like to say something. Great. Okay, so we have 3 delegations this evening. Our first delegation is Wayne Lukacs. He's the owner of 32 Carter Street, and he's coming forward to request that a fence located at the back of his property, which extends onto city property, be granted to stay. So each delegation has 10 minutes. So if Wayne, you want to come up, and there's a small red button on the speaker. If you want to press that, you'll be set to go.
Hi, my Your Honor, council members, committee. My name is Wayne Lucas. I live at 32 Carter Street in Colborne. I purchased a house approximately 25 years ago. And then when I did, there was 2 chain link fences running parallel down alongside of the house to massive lilac trees that were grown so tall they're already up to the telephone wires. Now, what happened is that I didn't know at the time that part of that fencing was on city property, okay? So what happened was that we were having kids, because it was an old chain link fence, turning around and mushrooming it down, having parties in the back by the lilac trees, I had my shed broken into twice, and even the police turned around and said, you got to get that fence fixed, because they could see where they took my generator, where they took my power washer, and numerous items. So in return, at that time, I was already working in the factory for 34 years. So in return, I thought, well, I better get this fence fixed. But then when I got a hold of the fencing company over, which gave me a good quote, he says, you know that this is city property. And I said, oh, geez, yeah, you're right. He goes, well, I wouldn't put the fence on there until you find out what's going on. So I, in return, said, well, I'll have to find out. He goes, look, this is the only window I have in time to do it. If I can't do it in this window of time, then I can't touch it till next year. So in return, I turned around and I came that following Monday to City Hall, and I asked to speak with the bylaw officer, which at that time was not available and wouldn't be available for a few days. So at that time, I said, well, I need to find out some information that's very imperative that I get a conclusion on this. And the lady said, would you like to speak to the mayor? And I said, if it's possible. So she made a call, and I came up and I saw the mayor. It was Vance at the time. And I told Vance the whole situation. I showed him the pictures. I showed him the old existing fence. I showed him where basically the property line would be. And I wasn't sure, like, 5, 6 feet or whatever over. So during that time, I said this out to him. He made a phone call to someone, I don't know who, and he got back to me. He says, Wayne, he says, don't worry about it. You're just replacing an existing fence. So I said, are you sure, Vance? He said, yeah, just go ahead and just replace the fence. So I replaced the fence the way that the fence was at the very beginning. And then I turned around and phoned up also the city hall over here, and they were saying that since I put that there, if somebody, because kids go up and down with their motorcycles and everything else up on the train tracks, if somebody ran into that fence, the city would be liable. Well, where my property is, if you go out to the far left of where the piece of fencing is, there's a big walnut tree, which is about yay big around. It's about 60 to 70 feet high. They'd have to go through that before they'd even touch my fence. And on the right-hand side of my property, where a piece of fencing is, by the lilac trees, is also a large tree, telephone pole, and an old, I guess it'd be like telegraph pole that is there. But during this time, I lost my son, and it made things really hard for me. So I had to retire from work because I could not work anymore. I couldn't take life anymore. But the wife and I'm lucky I married a woman for 48 years now. It was the hardest thing that we had to go through in our life. But we wanted to keep Jeff's name alive and around us. So what we did is that we bought 3 trees at No Park in the area where he used to fish. And the 1 tree we donated in his name, and we gave the other 2 trees to other people that excuse me, other people that lost their children. And at the same time, we bought 3 benches. One was donated from his grandchildren, one was donated from his friends, and one was donated from the wife and I. Also, we turned around and I picked up a very big collage of drawings, pictures, books, and everything else of the locks when they were being built. And I presented that to the mayor, and he was really astounded about it, and he said they'd be going into the city's library, and I received a letter of appreciation and thank you from the city over this. And since my son loved animals so much, we donated and had to import 5 sets of oxygen resuscitation masks from Portugal, which in return we donated to the fire department. And there's a plaque on the wall at the fire department in memory of my son that these masks were donated to him, to the fire department in the name of my son, to save animals. They're little masks all the way that they can save a gerbil, all the way up to that they can save a dog, because basically the masks are just for a human face. So there's a lot of other things that we donated down the line. I taught 3 years with Joanne Smart Serve for the city. I had my own time. I donated 3 years into the Canal Days. I was on the Flavors Committee. I tried to do the best I could, but with my son passing, I just couldn't take life. Since then, I've gotten into a very bad depression mode, and I have OCD. And this fence being taken down, those 2 small sections, would open up my whole backyard then, because my grandchildren have autism. Matter of fact, my grandson is the boy that raises the flag every year on the outside of City Hall, Jack Tyson. And our backyard is then completely now sealed in and safe, because I can't run any more than 10 feet without being winded. So if that was opened up, and he's really crazy about trains, if he's seen a train and he'd say, "Oh, Papa, look," and he would run, and I would never have a chance on grabbing him. People say to me, "Well, then, Wayne, why don't you build a fence and just right across your whole back of your backyard?" Well, I say to myself, yeah, that'd be fine, but then who's going to cut the grass between the fence and the lilac trees, which is about 5 feet? That's number one. Number two, Trillium has cut back so much in a lot of their benefits. Last year alone, I paid nearly $12,000 on my medications that I must take. I have 3 herniated discs, 1 degenerated disc. I have sciatica and stenosis. I had 3 major heart attacks. I was DOA at Hamilton General. I had my last heart attack. This is taking away those 2 small little pieces of fence has actually drove me crazy, because if I have to take them down, I don't know what I would do, because my dogs now are my life, my grandchildren are my life, and basically all I have is my backyard, my beautiful wife of 48 years, and my grandkids. And I'm asking the council and the mayor to have some compassion and allowing me to keep these 2 small pieces of fencing up in my backyard.
Okay, so I think council may have some questions, Wayne. Let me just ask. Any questions on this side? Councillor Clayliff.
Mr. Lucas, who told you that you had to take these pieces of fence down?
Pardon me?
Who advised you to take the fence down?
Well, the old fence, now the fence is
No,
down?
the pieces
Well, what happened is that everybody got a letter stating from the bylaw officer that that part of that is city property, and my two little sections of fence are going over it.
Yeah, so it,
And the only reason why I replaced it is because the old fence was wrecked by kids cutting through, going to the to school, and having parties in the back, drinking beer. And then the one time when I called the cops on them, well, the next day my whole house was egged, all around the whole house. I had to get somebody over to pressure wash all the eggs off of my house.
okay. Anything else, Counselor?
No, so it's been up for 9 years, according to your drawing? It's been
Yes.
there- Okay,
Yes.
that's all,
Yeah,
thank you.
And it did replace an existing fence that was there prior to him owning the house, just for some history. Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is actually for staff more than it is for Mr. Lucas. But I'm just wondering if every property on that block is being forced to move their fences, or is it just a select few? And if so, what is the liability to having them left the way they are?
Dan?
Through you, Councillor, or Mayor, to Councillor Demaray, my understanding is there was a complaint received, and so this particular property was notified that the fence is on city property with no encroachment.
Agreed. Yeah.
So
But it is along the rear of Carter Street.
it is, but I just, I find it odd because there are several properties with fences that do encroach, so I would understand if all were being done, but I certainly wouldn't understand if only one was being done.
Okay. Counselors? Counselor, go ahead. Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Can you walk us through the process then if to
Excuse
have a
me,
legal...
sir, I can't hear you.
Sure.
I lost a lot of my hearing and working in the factory.
No problem, Wayne. And thank you for your presentation. It took a lot of stamina, I know, to go through all that. Through you to Mr. Aquilina, Mr. Mayor, just wondering what the process would be for an encroachment cost. Is that readily something that a staff report would normally approve in situations like this, or is there an actual demand no return scenario with staff?
Yeah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, what occurs once the encroachment is identified? The property owner has an opportunity to address the situation, and depending upon who actually is the encroacher and whether they're a commercial property or residential property, there is a fee, and then ultimately is a report to council that does require their approval. And typically, because it's an encroachment, they need to have liability insurance naming the city. And my understanding is, because it's a residential property, you cannot get that liability insurance.
Counselor?
Thank you, Worship. So is the encroachment indeed on the city property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, yes, it is.
So if the person being encroached on has no problem with it, how would staff receive that? In other words, if the city wasn't, it wasn't problematic for the city and for your department to allow that encroachment, you would come back with a report stating the same?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, if, and again, depending upon who actually is encroaching, there would be an opportunity to come through with an encroachment agreement. My understanding, again, is that if it's a residential property owner, the ability to apply for and receive insurance policy naming the city is something that you cannot have.
Just lastly, on that last point on insurance, I've seen and was involved in a situation where one was, a resident was going to put a service line across city property, and insurance was asked for by the city. This was fairly recently. The property owner did not go that route and found another resolution, but I'm just wondering what would be the difference in the situation I've just described and wanes. In other words, the city does ask people from time to time for an encroachment agreement and insurance to protect the city.
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno, my understanding is that particular scenario you identified was an actual commercial property owner.
I just happen to have knowledge that it wasn't, but it's you mentioned it was your understanding that that's the way it is. Can we get that verified?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bruno, absolutely. I'll have bylaw staff actually here. I know there's been reports in the past I've been to council, and I know the bylaw officer is actually working on an actual encroachment bylaw. But that definitely will come back to council.
Thank you, Worship.
So with direction, Councillor, you want this to come back to us with the proper information?
Yes.
Okay, we get
I
Mr.
did have one other point from Mr.
Yep, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Lucas, is there any time issue for you that you're happy with it until staff comes back with a report, or you're not in need of getting this done in a hurry?
Well, we were all sent to letters stating that all that's on city property must be taken away by April the 7th
Okay.
Of this year, or the city will come and take it all away, and we would be charged for it.
Okay. I'm just wondering, as part of that recommendation to staff, if we could extend that deadline till we get the report back?
Yep.
Thank you.
And again, may I say too, like I said, on the extreme left is a large tree that if a guy was on a motorcycle, he'd be hitting that before anything. And on the other side, there's also a large tree, plus a telephone pole, plus an old telegraph pole that's there, that they'd be running into that. So if somebody was, like, they go on top of the railroad tracks when they run with their motorcycles, okay? It's about 30 feet away.
Yeah.
But if they lost control of their vehicle or something like this and came down, well, they'd be running into that before they'd even be near my fence.
Okay, Councillor Demeray, then Councillor Borger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit confused here because Mr. Lukacs is saying that he's referring to we getting letters. I'm assuming that means more than one property. Okay, yes, okay. And Dan, you're saying that it's a result of a complaint, and I'm really upset because this is a gentleman who's gone through former administration, the mayor, and gotten permission to do this, and now we're telling them that he's going to pay a price for doing that. That really bothers me. I don't think we should be going in that direction. But I'm wondering, are we doing this actively through the city and going back and looking at people who have existing structures on city property and asking them to make changes?
Yeah.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Demeray, I will get back to council at the time of the report to confirm whether or not it was a complaint. I just know that once we are made aware that there is encroachments on our property, we act accordingly. So whether there was more than one person or not, I can't confirm. But as I mentioned, I will then include that in the report that comes back to council.
Okay. This does stem from a water line that runs in the rear
area,
which is going to be moved in the future.
Okay.
But,
the water line
yeah,
is going to be replaced into the front of all the houses this spring. Yeah. So it's not a matter of worrying about the water line as of this time anymore. And on top of that too, halfway through of having the meeting with the mayor at that time about it, what was his name? The CEO, Robert Heil, whatever, came in at that time, and we explained everything fast to him. And he just said, don't worry about it, just replace it as existing fence. It was about a month and a half later, apparently Mr. Heil was at a function across the street because we're right across the street from Roselawn, and he remembered my address, and he came over and seeing me. I was sitting in my backyard, and my backyard is completely enclosed in because of my grandchildren being autistic and because of my dogs, okay? So he came in and I showed him, and he goes, don't worry about it. You know, so I looked at it that I did the right thing by coming to the City Hall, I did the right thing by, I mean, who else could I go over and above the mayor? Okay? And the CEO saying the same thing. And then all of a sudden, this would be like 50 years later, 55 years later, they're coming to us, well, to me, and saying, I gotta take those 2 5-foot sections or whatever out. I can't afford anything, like I say. My medication is nearly $1,000 a month that's not covered by Trillium. And I must take it, and I have OCD that if I don't get an answer on this, I know I won't be able to sleep tonight. I'd be pacing and everything else like this. Anybody that's gone through losing a child, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. It's the hardest thing that you got to go through in your life, especially when you're so close with my boy. I was with him every day. And since he's gone, my life has changed from day to night to salt and pepper. And I just feel by asking just for 2 pieces of 5-foot fence to stay in place, which has been there for all this time. And like I say, what else can I do besides come to City Hall and talk to the mayor? I mean, you know, and then you say, you know, it has to be put over to get, you know, more information. It's simple. It's plain and simple. Why it makes something so difficult? 2 pieces of fence, approximately 5 feet long, on there, and that's it. That's it.
We do have some more questions, Wayne. Councilor Borgard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. I know with some properties we have easement agreements. Like, would that be a viable solution at all?
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, an easement agreement is something that accompanies a planning application. And that's when there is approval to actually allow something on the property. In this particular case, the direction from staff was to remove the fence because it wasn't approved by the municipality to be there.
Easements work where if somebody's, like Bell is coming across our property lines, but it's our property, so we're not going on somebody else's property, they're coming on ours. So that's where the encroachment agreement comes up. So that's why Councillor brought that up. Councillor Claylough?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Aquilina, maybe I've misunderstood here. You said you just replaced this fence? It was there? Or was this a new piece you put there 9 years ago?
No, when I purchased the home, ma'am, there was 2 chain link fences going along each side, right up to the lilac trees.
So you didn't, when you put that new fence up, you didn't extend it those 5 feet?
No,
it was already...
I just replaced what was there.
So really, that's actually would have been our fence, and it's our fence, and why would he be on our property, like us saying that he has to take it down? Because technically, he didn't put it there, it was already there. He just replaced what was already there. Like he said, he came to City Hall. How does that work?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it may have been a case where nobody knew where the property line was, so it was an existing fence that's been there for...
Just looking for an
since
answer.
the house was, no, I understand that. We're trying to help Mr. Lukacs as much as possible. So, so Wayne, I think what's come through council though is to have staff get back to council with regards to what's going on and to best move forward with this, with causing the least amount of issue with you. So that's what we'll do. We'll make sure that staff contacts you when it does come forward. Do you believe March 25th, I think, is our next meeting? I think it's the 25th. Can we have something back by then, Dan?
Mr. Mayor, I can have something back verbally, but to actually bring forward a report, I can't.
But you can have something back verbally to us.
Yes.
Is that all right, council? Okay, consensus of council, that's fine. So Wayne, we'll give you a call. This will come back verbally to council on the 25th of March. Right? Make sure that's the date. So we'll be in contact with you to let you know exactly what's going on.
Okay,
Because that's the direction of this council, to do that,
About
okay?
that letter, got that, everything has to be taken down
Don't worry
April
about that
7th.
right now. We've put that with our direction to staff, that's on hold right now. So don't worry about that letter at this point. Okay?
Yeah,
Okay?
yes.
Good. That's
So
it. So we'll be in touch with you,
Okay.
and
so
we'll let you know what's going on, and then you can come to our March 25th meeting.
Come to March 25th?
Yeah,
meeting?
we'll contact you first though, Wayne.
Okay,
Okay?
okay.
Great.
I thank you, and I thank you, Mayor and council members. I hope that your decision is compassionate and you understand the situation, especially with the, my grandchildren being autistic.
Yeah.
It means a lot.
Okay.
It
Good.
means a lot.
Thank you.
I thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Dan, we're all set with that then? We're okay? Direction? All right. Next is Joe Nichols, owner of 57 Oak Street, requesting a bylaw exemption to install a second driveway on his property. That's on page 11 of your agenda. Just a little red button there, Joe, if you want to press that. Yep. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks for taking the time to see me. Hopefully I do okay. I've never been to one of these meetings before. As mentioned, I'm Joe Nichols. I live at 57 Oak Street. My wife and I have been Port Colborners for a couple of years now. And as mentioned, to my purpose, I hope to install a second driveway despite being a fair bit short on the required frontage. I'm hoping this can move forward mainly based on the fact that it's a multi-family duplex. I've been noticing some vehicle congestion on the street, and with two families at any given time living in the house, I believe there'd be a twofold benefit: easing congestion, but also allowing our municipal workers to do their jobs safely and efficiently with garbage and recycling collection and snow plowing and things like this. I did want to mention that if this was allowed to go through despite the shortfall in the requirement, I've been in contact with a contractor to dig up and waterproof my foundation in the spring anyways. He could do this work at the same time, eliminating a prolonged eyesore in the community, because we do want to contribute to our community and keep things looking good. And also, obviously this would benefit my wife and myself, improving our property, but I also feel, again, it would benefit the community, improving the usability and the efficiency of the whole neighborhood. It would really allow us to just continue offering a high-quality rental apartment at a reasonable rate with plenty of parking. So the situation now is that the current driveway is roughly 10 feet wide coming out from the side of the house. This driveway is a single lane that I can't really share. I do operate a small business as a subcontractor, and I need access to the garage, coming in and out all the time. Also, the current driveway is on the opposite side from the entrance to the rental apartment. The current driveway takes roughly about 10 feet out from the side of the house. The opposite side of the house, there's about 21 feet from the house to the property line. So, because of this, I just feel there could be room for a driveway without encroaching on my neighbor's property, and would just help all of us to function efficiently. That's basically what I've come to say. I hope we can move forward with this, but if there are questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer any of them.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Joe, for your presentation. I drove by your house and had a look at it, and I was wondering a couple things. One was, have you had any discussions with your neighbors? Because they would be the people that, if anyone would have the most concern, I would think, for it. I'm just wondering if you can tell us if you have spoken with the neighbors.
Great question. I have not, but it's only because on the side that the driveway will go, my neighbor is away for the winter, so.
Okay, thank you. Through you to Mr. Aquilina, I noticed that, I had talked to Dan today about this, but I had noticed that I thought it was a planning issue. And this had actually, I think, come to the attention of engineering, if I'm correct. So I'm wondering if there are, before heading things off, if there would be any planning issues as it relates to putting that side driveway in, and if it has come through to engineering first, if I could also get a comment from Mr. Lee.
Okay, Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. In the review of this by staff in the engineering department, what they simply have done is we've had them follow the dimensioning within the current bylaw. And in that specific bylaw, it states that if the frontage is 30 meters or greater, then a second entranceway for driveway purposes can be granted. In this particular parcel, well, 30 meters, for those who aren't quick with the conversion process, is approximately 100 feet. This particular parcel in question has 50-foot frontage, and so subsequently it flagged on staff's review of this because it's essentially half of what is recommended in the bylaw.
Councillor?
Mr. Aquilina?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno, there are no planning issues that I'm involved with on the zoning bylaw, so I have no comment.
Okay. Councillor Bagia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did also drive by your property a couple of times. Have you seen a green SUV there? I wasn't scoping the neighborhood out.
No problem.
Anyway, on the side of your house, facing the south side, you have your little bit of grass there, then you have a sidewalk. How many feet do you propose this driveway to be on that side of your house?
Well, that was almost going to be something I might have asked the councillors if there was a limitation you would want to impose. I could see, I do need to replace the sidewalk as well. I could see making the sidewalk against the house, we'll say 3 feet out, and if I made a similar driveway to the other side, being 10 feet, that to me would still leave a fair bit of room between the property line and any encroachment.
Yep, Councillor?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one more question. I would really like input from your neighbor, so
Sure.
if you could somehow get a hold of him or her through a relative or something, and I think that would go along a great ways with council.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Chris, so other than the distance, there really is no issue with engineering, aside from the distance?
To you, Mr. Mayor, and Council in general. Just at the 50 feet, depending on the dimensions of the proposed driveway, that has an influence. And staff, in their review of it, were reluctant to grant this just because of the fact that there was no dimensioning on the sidewalk. I actually have a picture of the drive-by on the street here, which I assume some of the other councillors have.
Yeah, we all have it, yeah.
Yes. And when you look at the property or the driveway proposed to the right of the building, there's a sidewalk which has previously been mentioned, but the removal of that could facilitate a driveway closer to the building. The issue then would be just how close to the neighbor, and if the neighbor is agreeable, because it does fall considerably under the bylaws dimensioning.
So just 1 second, Councillor. So in essence, if you had 100 foot between the two driveways and it was still that close to the house next door, there wouldn't be an issue, or there still would be?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. If he had the 100 feet, then he would be exempt under the bylaw, and he could put his driveway wherever he wanted on that 100 feet.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's straight. Councillor Beauregard.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris. Why is 100 feet the recommended? Like, is there a particular reason for that?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. That's a dimension that's been in the bylaw for a number of years now, and it was one that was recommended at the time based on the size of houses, the size of the properties, and just the congestion of multiple driveways and entrances.
Okay. Councillor?
Last question to the presenter. Do you know if there's any utilities, particularly city in this case, water, wastewater, going through the proposed new driveway? Right?
Joe?
I don't at this point. That would have been my first step after seeing whether or not I'd be allowed to do it, but perhaps that could have been a good preemptive step.
Sure. I know there's certainly a lot of driveways in Port Colborne that attain the shut-off in the driveway, concrete driveways and that. Through you to the engineering department. Chris, is there any issue you have with if there are services in the area of the proposed driveway?
Chris?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. A water shut-off or a sewer clean-out within a driveway is definitely not a preferred solution because of the issues down the road with reinstatements. If we should have a problem with either one of those infrastructure, we would like to, and we actually, it is a policy now that we have going forward where we're going to be putting those types of infrastructures in the grassed areas. That may be something to be considered if that can be located in the field, and just see how this particular driveway, if approved, would impact on that specifically.
Yes, Councillor.
Just to round that out, if the presenter can get that assurance from the neighbor, as Councillor Bagu suggested, would it be up to him to do the locates, or do we have a look and see what hours that may be there?
Chris?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. No, the locates would be done by municipal staff, so it's just a case of arranging a time.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, Joe, in essence, what I'm hearing from council is that if you can talk to your neighbor as soon as possible.
Right.
And I know he's away, but if they, if they're back in time, just to tell them what you're doing.
Sure.
If you want to contact Chris's department with regards to doing locates, I'm sure you can get the number off him this evening.
Okay.
So you can call them and in the next few weeks get it booked in, and then it can come back to us with some information from staff regarding this, then we can go from there. How's that sound?
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions, councillors? Oh, sorry. Councillor Wells first? Thanks.
Through you, Mayor, to Joe. Do you plan to put in the same style of driveway on the other side of the house as you already have?
As it currently stands, there's what I would call crushed gravel. That's about it. I would do that at first, no doubt. Likely just because of cost. I could see into the future it being paved, perhaps on both sides.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually to you. We're putting the onus on him to go to his neighbors and ask them to.
Yes.
And then are we expecting him to report back if there's any issues or concerns, or are we going to instruct him to go to his neighbors? Neighbors contact us.
He'll have
are we
to,
going to follow up?
He'll have to come back with us when he lets us know. He can call the clerk's office and let the clerk know. But in the meantime, he can talk to our staff with regards to locates to move things along. I think the one thing that's going to hold it up is his neighbor, depending, when do they normally return, do you know, Joe?
It could be the end of this month, so fairly soon.
2 or 3 weeks away. I mean, you're probably not going to dig soon. I mean, you've got some removal to do. You know, your contractor's going to probably have locates done anyways when he comes in to dig your foundation.
Likely,
so
yeah.
At least he'll know a couple of things that are there. So if that's okay with you, then yeah, if you can just, once you get that information, get back to our clerk's office. They'll get you on the docket again for the closest meeting to that date, and then we can move forward with you.
Great.
All right?
Thank you all very much.
Yeah. Well, he will talk to staff. But before you leave tonight, grab Chris's number. You got it? All right, so Chris is all set. All right, Joe?
Okay, so
Good.
we're good. So should I still contact Chris?
Still contact Chris, yeah, or his department. I know
Clerk's
he is leaving
department.
on vacation.
Okay.
But if you get a hold of his department, they'll move forward with you.
Okay, once more, that's the clerk's department?
First is engineering
Engineering, okay.
with Chris.
All right.
And then, so once that's done and you've got your neighbor's information,
Then I report
then
to the
you go to the
clerk's
clerk's department and you'll come back and see us.
All right.
Okay.
I think I got it straight. Thank
If
you.
you need anything, just call my office and myself or Nancy can help you from there. I'll let her know tomorrow what's going on, in case you
Great.
just need any more information.
Excellent. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Good, thank you. Is that it, Council? You're all set? Okay, great. Okay, our third delegation is Gay Douglas of Literacy Link Niagara, providing information about myths and facts about adult literacy in Niagara, and that's found on page 13 of your agenda. Not here this evening? Okay. Okay. Going once? All right. On to the mayor's report. Remembrance of our service personnel. Tomorrow we will be hanging yellow ribbons on the lampposts in front of City Hall, as we have done every year since 2009, when Corporal Tyler Crooks lost his life in Afghanistan. These yellow ribbons symbolize our remembrance not only of Tyler and his ultimate sacrifice while serving his country, but of all past veterans and current personnel serving our country. If everyone could please stand for a moment of silence with regards to remembrance of our service personnel. Thank you. Last week I had the opportunity to meet officials from Canadian Niagara Power and members of our staff to have a post-windstorm discussion about the storm that hit our city over the weekend of February the 23rd and 24th, as well as an update on the hydro situation in Port Colborne. Canadian Niagara Power are scheduled to come to our April the 8th meeting to provide council and members of the public with an update on past and future plans for our city. I can tell you that during the two recent windstorms, CNPI and our staff worked extremely hard to get power back on in areas of the city that experienced outages. But as well as we worked together, especially through Sunday night in February, we realized we could do better. We have now established a wind protocol that will result in a pre-preparation meeting between our staff and CNPI staff well in advance of any windstorm coming forward. CNPI also committed to improved communications, which was evident yesterday in their broadcasts during yesterday's power outage that affected the entire city. Having said that, with regards to yesterday's hydro outage was due to a main line coming in from Crowland Station in Welland, which feeds the Davis Street Station substation. Power went out at around 4:15. It was an insulator failure on the main line. CNP was able to alternate some feed out of another line that would only look after a portion of our city, mostly in the west side, due to the capacity of that line. We were on the phone to Hydro One, or they were on the phone to Hydro One the whole time. And CNP did not have any issues with lines within our municipality yesterday. So there was nothing wrong with the CNP lines. It has to do with Ontario Hydro. This situation has been going on, most councillors that are sitting around this table, and between myself, Councillor Bruno, and Councillor Bodner, we've been here the longest. Mayor Bodner, when he was mayor, Mayor Badaway, and now myself. You know, we've been asking along with CNP, along with the former Port Colborne Hydro, to have the line replaced between Crowland Station and Davis Street. Now, Davis Street will be rebuilt with a timeline of around 2024. Ontario Hydro is working with Valet right now with regards to the land. However, that doesn't stop them from fixing the main line that is inadequate feeding our community. The other issue we have that CNP is working on right now is a secondary feed, so that when the main line is down, that they can divert power through another area to feed the community. We all hear it from our businesses. We all hear it from our homeowners and residents, apartment owners. When the power goes out, we have sump pumps that don't work. We have refrigeration systems that may spoil food, especially in the restaurant industry. It's not like our stuff at home. If it goes so long, it has to be thrown out, and that is loss of money to our community businesses. Not only that, you have a number of apartment buildings in town that have elevators. If you have seniors in those buildings, sometimes the stairs aren't the easiest thing to manage. So we need to push forward with Ontario Hydro. Both myself and staff have taken that task. We'll carry on what we've tried to do in the past, but we're actually going to, I think, need to go further. I will be contacting the provincial government with regards to this. This is a long time in coming. CNP has assured us that those lines need to be changed. This isn't just an ask because we want nice new shiny lines. These are old lines, and we're seeing what's happening. Because a lot of times it has to do with the Ontario Hydro lines, not the CNP lines. Now, I will go back to the storm with 78-mile-an-hour winds a few weeks ago, where we had a few major outages due to trees down, but those are really beyond our control. But yesterday, yes, we had some wind, but it shouldn't have been a storm that the whole city is without power. Although the Shirkston Community Center hunkered down, and we still had good chili yesterday. So I will be taking this forward along with our senior staff and going to Ontario Hydro. We'll also be contacting the provincial government and getting some urgency to this matter. It's something that we won't stand for anymore. So along with your support, Council, we will be bringing back more information on this. Last week at Regional Council, we talked about governance. The mayors and the regional chair have met over the last couple of weeks with a roundtable meeting and putting forward a united front with regards to this. The regional councillors also asked to have their input on this situation, which Councillor Butters was involved with. So we're going to our regional councillors as well. But it is being driven by the municipalities due to the fact that that's what the province has asked for. But we will, as a state, go in a unanimous, united front with regards to municipalities and our regional councillors going forward with the governance issue. One good thing that came out of that meeting, and Councillor Butters can attest to that, is our regional chair, Jim Bradley, spoke about the Minister of Municipal Affairs speaking about this issue across the province, and in essence basically said amalgamation really wasn't on the table at this time, and that was repeated twice in the House. Chair Bradley, who has extensive experience in the House and respects the minister very much, I know they know each other, had good feelings coming out of that meeting with regards to what the minister was putting forward and what they're looking at for the province and Niagara itself. So that was good that came out of that. This coming Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, the Federal Minister of Transportation, the Honourable Marc Garneau, he'll be coming to Port Colborne to meet with trade corridor stakeholders, including representatives of industry, elected officials, and educational institutions. I will have the opportunity to have a one-on-one with him to speak about Port Colborne's opportunities within the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Niagara Gateway region, and discussing the need for a Port of Niagara, which also relates to our rail and highway infrastructure. I do thank our MP Badaway in helping get Minister Garneau. This is top of our list is our seaway area and our marine industry. Right now that industry is booming, and we want to make sure we get our share of it. The Port of Hamilton, as you know, is pretty much full, and we've had consultation with them on best practices to move forward, and we know meeting with the minister will just emphasize what we're looking at here in Niagara. March break activities. March break, we're going to are currently underway at the Public Library in King Street and the Valet Health and Wellness Center. Please check our website for lots of great family fun activities to keep the little ones busy. The opening of the Welland Canal is will start on Sunday, March the 17th. In addition to being St. Patrick's Day, St. James and St. Brendan Anglican Church will be holding their annual Mariner service to give thanks and blessings to those mariners who will be heading out onto the Great Lakes and beyond later this week. The service will start at 7 p.m. in the sanctuary and will continue at the Guild Hall with fellowship and music. Friday, March 22nd is the official opening of the Welland Canal, and in Port Colborne that means Fair Trade Pancake Breakfast and Top Hat Ceremony. So the top hat just came in for the captain. I did try it on, and it's actually pretty neat. That's given to the captain as a keepsake. We do have our original one that's always kept at our museum because of its age. Please join us at Lock 8 Park at 8 a.m. on Friday, March the 22nd, as our Fair Trade Committee rustles up a free pancake breakfast with plenty of hot Fair Trade coffee, tea, and hot chocolate. Our entertainment will be provided by students from McKay Public School. And at 8:30, we'll begin the Top Hat ceremony, welcoming the captain of the first downbound ship into the Welland Canal. It's a great annual tradition, and we hope everyone will join us. Any questions with regards to the mayor's report? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor, yes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What time tomorrow is the yellow ribbon ceremony?
It's not a ceremony. We have staff in the morning. We'll place the yellow ribbons on our lampposts, and they'll be there. Okay. All right. Thank you. Next is our regional council's report. Councillor Butters.
Well, thank you, Mayor Steele. Glad to be here tonight. So a little bit of update. The tax levy rate at the region was set at 3.83. That was wrestled down from 5.8. Partly it was brought down by monies that came back from the MPCA budgets of about $1.6 million. So our representation on the MPCA, I've been doing a really good job in terms of getting a handle on that. The other way that it was lowered, which has me somewhat concerned, was that $3 million was moved from a tax stabilization reserve. And around this table, we've always had really good treasurers, I think, that kind of taught us not to take monies and put to operating to artificially lower the tax rates. But they have this reserve established there. The thing that bothers me, I guess, is that in 2015 there was $30 million in that reserve, and now it's down to 23. So if we keep on doing that artificial lowering, at some point, probably in less than 10 years maybe, that reserve could be totally empty. And then what do you do? So I just raised that as, yes, it comes in at 3.83. Nobody's happy with it. Everybody would like it to be lowered. But actually, in fact, it's actually been lowered artificially to boot. So you just should be aware of that. The water and wastewater as well came in at 5.15. That it looks like that's going to be kind of an ongoing possibility unless grants from other levels of government are found to help get that down in years to come. Just as a matter of interest, the region of York's water budgets, that was 9%, Halton was 3.7%, Peel was 6.5%, and Durham was 1.8%. How they did that, I have no idea, but it might be interesting to know the answer to that question. And in terms of like our local municipalities, Thorold's came in at 6.55, Grimsby was 4.7, Niagara-on-the-Lake 12.2, and Port Colborne at 4.26, I think. So as much as those numbers mean what they mean, and that means like that we're reinvesting in and trying to fix infrastructure, I know it's still a hard hit for all of us that have to pay those bills, but pay them we must. I can remember Councillor Bruno, one of his favorite expressions was pay me now or pay me later. And it was true then and it stands true today. So that's all I have for tonight. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Councillor Butters. Any questions to the councillor? Seeing none, thank you. Now on to councillors' issues or inquiries. Starting to my left, Councillor Clayliff, Councillor Borgard, anything? Councillor Wells, Councillor, nothing. Okay. Staff responses or anything from staff? Nothing. I know you two are normally out there, so anything from you guys on your other jobs? No. Okay. Thank you. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item number 1 was Councillor Wells or Beauregard. Oh, sorry. I apologize. Councillor Beauregard. Both of you.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the implementation of a community planning permit system and the use of inclusionary zoning within the city of Port Colborne. I ask that the Director of Planning and Development investigate the implementation of a community planning permit system and the use of inclusionary zoning within the city of Port Colborne, and that the Director of Planning and Development report back to Council with recommendations through the official plan review. Now
just a sec. Yeah. Seconder?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Wells, you want to second that? Since you've already had your hand up. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
All right. I'm just going to find, I had it here, the description of what the planning permit system is. Sorry, 1 second. All right. So the community planning permit system provides a land use approval system that combines the zoning, site plan, and minor variance processes into an application and approval. It gives an additional local flexibility in the land use planning system by allowing variations in development standards and discretionary uses. These are subject to criteria and minimum and or maximum standards that are set out in a community planning permit bylaw. A community planning permit system also allows a municipality to establish conditions that can be imposed in making decisions on community planning permit applications, including conditions that require community facilities or services to be made available. So this allows, it makes the process of development streamlined, is essentially what this would do. And then the second part of my motion includes inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is an optional land use planning tool that a municipality may use to require affordable housing units to be included in residential development of 10 units or more. These units would then need to be maintained as affordable over a specified period of time. And this would sort of link in with what Councillor Demaray's motion was in the past that we passed forward. So that's what I bring forward.
Okay. Questions for the councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Aquilina, is this something that can be laid over our existing zoning? So could you, bit by bit, take a section at a time in the city or areas that are vacant, perhaps prone to development? And would you go in there and highlight these zones and whether they're going to need potentially committee of adjustment approval or anything like that? Is this a mechanism to make that zoning more complete or more robust so that there are less appeals and less challenges? Everybody knows what can and can't be done there and some of the restrictions that happen? Or, because I'm having a little difficulty understanding how this deviates from the future. I've read up on it, but it seems like a difficult process to presuppose what's going in there and the parameters of same.
Yeah.
Through you to Councillor Bruno, I believe stepping back with the development permit system, and that's something that I would bring back to council, but importantly to that is what area would the municipality like to establish that development permit system? Is that within an existing community improvement plan area? or is it in the entire municipality? Those are things that council will have to consider, whether or not they want to go down the development permit system. With inclusionary zoning, it's a matter of looking at the zoning bylaw, looking at what you're looking to include as inclusionary, looking into our current uses that are permitted, and see if there's any deviation from the actual zones that we have in place and the uses that are permitted. So that as well, through Councillor Beauregard's motion, would come back to council in an entire package. You'll have all the information and for future consideration.
Okay. Timelines, Dan, approximately? Best guesstimate.
Well, Councillor Beauregard's motion referred to the review of the official plan. So I know that council has before them, as part of the budget deliberations, monies to be set aside for each year to then have enough monies to engage a consultant, to then do the official plan review update. So if the motion that I see before us tonight refers to official plan review, I believe the direction for council to have the monies is set aside each year for the next 3 years. So 3 years from now, there should be monies, and then it's a matter of engaging a consultant, and then going back and reporting to council. So you're looking at 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years for this coming back?
Yes.
That long, eh?
Under the direction of the motion that's before you this evening, correct.
Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to everyone. In order for us to be able to implement these things, it has to go into our official plan. And as far as I know, the official plan doesn't have this language. The official plan is going to be under review, as Mr. Eklund was saying. So my intention is to have this sort of language be implemented into the official plan if council does decide that they want to go through with this sort of system, because that has to be in place first.
So, Dan, so you're saying work will start approximately when on this?
When there's monies budgeted to do an official plan update. So
When there is monies?
When there is monies, and I ballpark 20,000 per year for 3 years to give us $60,000 to retain a consultant.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. All right, any other questions? No other questions? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thanks, Councillor. Item number 2, Councillor Wells.
Just have a question, Mr. Mayor, through you to
Oh, just throw it on the table first. Oh. Just read the top.
Okay. Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering Division, Report 2019-22, subject, project number 2013-09, annual asphalt patching contract extension.
Got a seconder? Councillor Bodnar. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris Lee. Is there any way you can quantify the financial benefits that the city would be seeing by extending this contract?
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. In going through this report, as some people I would hope would pick up on, is that the pricing that is proposed by the contractor is fixed at 2016 rates. So what we're doing in 2019 and 2020 is getting work done at the prices that were quoted in 2016. So in short form, what we've done is we've eliminated, first of all, in 2019, the 3.5% capital cost increase for construction. So that's not been included right off the bat. Plus, we've eliminated all of those capital cost increases from every year from 16 forward. So potentially, if you add all those together, we're getting, if those increases had come in the tendering process from 2016 forward to 17, 18, 19, and 20, we'd be looking typically in between 10 and 12% increase in the cost of those services if we had gone to the tender process. So to continue on with the work, and as staff is recommending in the report, with the freezing of those rates at the 2016 level, then the city is saving dollars and cents. The budgets will be spent the same, but the quantity of work that we'll be able to accomplish is essentially 10% greater than it would be if we had gone through the annual inflation processes since 16.
Councillor?
Thank you, Chris.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, other councillors, Councillor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are we looking at all three of these together, or are we just doing the first?
Just number 2 first.
Just no question.
Okay, Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chris. And I guess this goes with the other ones that we're extending also. So are we doing it solely on a cost basis? What happens if it's a crappy contractor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. We do not even entertain that if we have had issues with the contractor and his workmanship. We only allow this if the contractors come forward, and we've had very good reports of good quality workmanship and a good response to our requests.
Okay, Councillor? That's it? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 3, Councillor Wells?
Through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Lee again.
Read the top.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, got it now. Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering Division, Report 2019-23, subject project number 2015-10, Annual Concrete Sidewalk Construction Contract Extension.
Seconder, Councillor Desmarais. Go ahead, Councillor.
You, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee. Again, the same question here is that there is no quantification on the amount of savings that one would recognize, and I do appreciate the fact that we're looking at reduced pricing on of 3%, but is there any way that we can compete or we can ask for competitive pricing and work that even down more, since we're in that era of trying to save finances?
Chris?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. What staff is doing in this recommendation is that the sidewalk replacement in this particular report is a quantity / sum of money that council approves. The intent is for staff to spend all of that budget based on a lot of the requests from council, as well as a review of our inventory and what our trips are, which sidewalks need to be replaced next. And as it states in this report, this will be the first increase of 3% since 2016. So it's the same mathematics again, except we won't have 0 increase from 16, we'll have a 3% increase for the 16 pricing. So we will be able to do 3% less sidewalks in 2019 versus what we did in 2016 for the same money.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Lee. Chris, I've always found that it's been very helpful in the years that I have received a list from engineering on the sidewalks and roads that are going to be done that year. And I haven't got one for this year, and I'm thinking that possibly the rest of the council may like one as well. So could you please provide that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais and the rest of council. Yes, that was staff's intent with this report. If it is approved, then that would establish our dollar limits, and then we know what size the list would be. But until such time, we're in a standalone mode for now.
Okay. Councillor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee. Is there any possibility, the other 2 quotes were at, I believe, 2% and 2.8. Is there any possibility, and they're both over 2 years, could we ask for this one to be extended for the 3% going over 2 years to afford us even more savings?
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Clayliff. That is all that the contractor has offered at this time. So what we are recommending is that we take his current offer, and 2020 will be another negotiation, or we may have to go to tender if he's not able to hold his pricing.
Can we ask him at least to consider the 2 years, since all the others are 2 years, and then they would all come up at the same time again?
Staff has asked that question of him, and the response at this time was he only wanted to grant it for the 1 year.
Okay. All right, Councillor?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Item number 4, Councillor Wells.
Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering's Division, Report 2019-24, subject project 2015-11, annual asphalt resurfacing extension.
Seconder, Councillor Demeray. Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee again. Again, is there an attempt to quantify this, the savings, the benefits, and then, or possibly even reduce these costing? I see it's at 2%, but again, as you've heard other councillors tonight, we're trying to look for savings that we can get.
Staff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. This is a very similar situation with this particular resurfacing contract. The contractor has proposed a 2% increase, which is less than the 3.5 that is the current industry standard for 2019. We can only guesstimate what 2020 will bring. And the recommendation for staff to extend this is strictly based on the fact that it's below all of the numbers that we've received, and we wanted to proceed forward with it.
Okay, Councillor?
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Bodder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chris. Chris, I think it's important for the public watching and even the councillors here. You must have a gauge on what other municipalities are paying for services that we're now extending. And is that something you look at in your decision in extending this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. Yes, very much so. With a lot of these reports, as you've just noticed, the contractors are fixing their rates for 2 and 3 years. What we have found in the past in the tendering process is that we've been getting very competitive pricing, especially in the asphalt area. And there's probably a number of reasons for that, which I won't speculate on. But anyway, that being said, compared to some of the other municipalities, we have very good pricing. A lot of that has to do with our locale because of the feedstock, so we're told anyway. And we also have the good fortune of having 2 of the larger paving companies within the region located within our municipal boundaries, so they're very competitive. So we know that we get good pricing from them, and that shows in our comparison with some of the other municipalities within Niagara and outside of Niagara as well. We know that pricing can be considerably more when you get into the Hamilton area. So we are trying to take advantage of that, and hence the reasoning behind these reports.
Okay, Councillor. Thank you. Anything else? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 5, Councillor Borgard.
Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering Division, Report 2019-28, Subject Project Number 2015-04, Citywide Grass Mowing Contract Extension.
Seconder for that, Councillor Wells. Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee. I see some ambiguity in here between the title and the description. It says citywide grass mowing in the title, and then in the description it refers to the roadside specifically. Are there more than one contractors in terms of grass cutting?
Chris?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. Yes, this is only the grass cutting that is handled by the Engineering and Operations Department, which is only the roadside. So any of the grass cutting that is done in the parks would be done under, if it was to continue. I know that there's a budget proposal currently within the parks budget that they would like to do a pilot project to take over that parks grass cutting and do it in-house. We are actually, this particular report addresses it, as you'll notice, for only 1 year, because the intent is that we intend on the engineering and operations side to investigate that very similar proposition that the parks is going to have in 2019. So if theirs proves to be successful, and then we can do the math and the numbers, we may be back in 2020 saying that we may take the grass cutting on the roadsides in-house. So that's why this is only for the 1 year.
Okay, yeah, that was my concern, because I thought in the previous council meeting that I heard that we were thinking about taking it on because there may have been issues at one point with the contractor. in terms of grass cutting. So I just want to make that clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Item number 6. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to read all of that only to set the stage for the people at home watching. And also, if I could ask my questions after the presenters, was that the intent anyways?
That's the intent, correct.
Thank you, Worship. Number 6 is Planning Development Department Planning Division Report, number 2019-14, subject site alteration permit, Port Colborne Quarries. The Council approved a site alteration permit for Port Colborne Quarries for the placement of approved MOECP Table 1 clean inert fill in Pit 1 for a 20-year period subject to the following conditions. 1, the Ministry of Natural Resources consent to change the type of rehabilitation program. 2, that Port Colborne Quarries follow Golder Associates Soil Management Plan. 3, that Port Colborne Quarries work with applicable agencies to ensure a portion of the Yancey remains exposed to help create a form of public access for educational purposes. And 4, that a site alteration permit fee of $1,420 be submitted to the Department of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Councillor Seconder. Councillor Beauregard. This evening we have 3 delegations. The first delegation is David Cisco, IBI Group, and Steve DeRoche, Golder Associates Limited, representing Port Colborne Quarries. If you want to come up to the podium, there's a red button.
Mayor Steele, members of council, good evening. My name is David Cisco. I'm a senior planner with IBI Group, and I'm here tonight representing Port Colborne Quarries, Inc., and their request for a site alteration permit for their Pit 1 lands. With me, Steve DeRoche from Golder Associates, and Steve is the engineer that prepared the fill management plan that is attached to the site alteration permit that you have in your package tonight, I believe starting on page 89. At this time, I'd like to thank Mr. Aquilina for his planning report 2019-14 and confirm that Port Colborne Quarries, Inc. fully supports its recommendations. However, I'd like to make a few additional comments related to it. First, the fill management plan that Steve prepared was based on the Ministry of the Environment guidelines. After it was prepared and submitted to Mr. Aquilina this past January, Steve also forwarded it to the Ministry of the Environment for them to confirm their satisfaction and essentially to pre-scrutinize it. As it turned out, they recommended some minor changes and small tweaks. So we have an updated version of that report here. However, in order to ensure that the fill management plan and therefore the site alteration permit is actually a living document that reflects any and all current ministry updates, I'm suggesting a slight modification to recommendation number 2 that is before you. Currently, that recommendation states that Port Colborne Quarries, Inc. follow the Golder Associates fill management plan. I'm recommending that it would be changed to Port Colborne Quarries, Inc. follow the Golder Associates fill management plan and or as modified to reflect any updating of applicable MECP guidelines. So if in 3 years, 5 years, the ministry has changes to their guidelines, they would be automatically reflected in this document. So just to clarify, although we are here tonight requesting approval of the site alteration permit from you, the underlying ministry that ensures all of this will happen as intended is the Ministry of the Environment. So the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the MECP. That is their mandate, and that is what they do. The legislation regarding fill management is recent and very all-encompassing, and it is used as the key enforcement tool for all similar fill sites throughout the province. If PCQ is delinquent in any element of the process, whether documentation or testing, the ministry will issue stop work orders, period. It's that black and white. It will happen immediately. Secondly, last fall on October 9th, at the previous council meeting where this matter was scheduled, Mr. Linga and Mr. Wells provided a PowerPoint that was meant to illustrate future land uses that might occur on these lands once it was backfilled. And that starts on page 52 of your package. That presentation included, in part, what appear to be some scary pictures taken from the internet of massive smoke-belching steel manufacturing plants. I want to reinforce for Council 2 fundamental points. The application before you is only for the permission to backfill, and any future planning process to deal with future land uses will and must involve a separate public process. And B, the City of Port Colborne planning staff and the Region of Niagara planning staff have invited myself and staff from Port Colborne Quarries twice now to meet with them to discuss what planning process would look like to address these future land uses on the site. From those meetings, I can conclusively confirm that my client, Port Colborne Quarries, has committed to financially supporting the undertaking of a secondary plan that will include all the Pit 1 lands. This secondary plan will be undertaken under the direction of the region and the city, not Port Colborne Quarries. Such a secondary plan will look at internal street patterns, appropriate connections to arterial roads, servicing exit points, and servicing options, as well as appropriate land uses for the site. So that's all the comments I have. I'd like to thank you for your time, and this time Steve and I would be pleased to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, gentlemen. Questions at this time? Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, we can recall them.
Yes, you can.
After we hear the other presentation.
Sure you can.
Thank you.
Okay. So nothing at this time, but we can call you back up. Thanks, gentlemen. With regards, before we go to our second delegation, with regards to the change that they've asked for to add the and/or as modified by the MOECP guidelines, is that something you guys want to add into this at this time? Councillor?
I'm happy to add it in because it strengthens what's there now with respect to changes that might happen down the road. To commit to those now is something I've not seen a proponent ever do. I think it's quite proactive. Thank you.
Can we take it as a friendly amendment, or do you want a motion? You want a motion as amended? Okay, so before we go on, can we do this as an amendment to the motion? Before we move forward, just so that everybody is talking about the same thing moving forward? So I'll need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bagu. Questions to that? Councillor Bodnar, to the amendment.
So again, I'd still like to hear from whoever else is going to speak before I vote on something that they've asked to put in. There may be tweaks to it that may come to us as we hear presenters. So while I think it sounds like a very good idea, again, people are here to speak. I'd like to hear something and just see whether we might want to, something we didn't think of, right?
That's fine. Is that all right, though? But at least we know it's on the floor. Okay, good. So we'll hold off then, all right? That's good to the mover and seconders then? Okay. So our second delegation is David Henderson. Just press the red button on the speaker in front of you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. What I've got is my first slide, and as you can tell, it's contaminated because I did a typo on it. But one of the things I've learned in my career as a professional engineer is that in many cases I've seen the solution to pollution is dilution. And this is what you have to be careful here with this proposal. You can put clean fill in there, but all clean fill in Ontario is approximately 15% contaminated. You will deal with that. Not now, whatever. Flip to the next one. I've got some, oh, can I do that here? Where? Oh. That one there? Great. What I'd like to do is ask some questions of council and staff, if you don't mind, to see where we are on this. No? Yeah. Give me the mouse.
Oh.
There we go. Huh? Oh, I was only going to take 5. No, we can't see this. That's on. Okay. Some questions I've got, if you don't mind. One, is Port Colborne aware of the survey for municipal soil bylaws that was done?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, at the time when this bylaw was created, it was in 2010. So the answer I would say is that no.
You're not aware of the new one that's come out then? Okay. Has Port Colborne heard or been in contact with the Ontario Soil Regulation Task Force?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, I have not.
Okay. Have we heard of Management of Excess Soil, a guide to best practices by the OECC?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, I have.
Good. We got one. Does Port Colborne have a fill bylaw?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, we do.
And is the Port Colborne's bylaw adequate, and does it meet the recommendation of the Ontario Soil Regulation Task Force?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, I can't confirm that question, if we do or not.
I can help you. Yours was written in 2010. The task force recommendations came out in 2013, and they were submitted to all municipalities within Ontario and recommended that they be adopted. Is Port Colborne aware of the problems faced by other municipalities with clean fill dump sites in Ontario?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, I'm not aware.
And do we have any vulnerable aquifers in Port Colborne?
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, we do.
Thank you.
I think we're standing on one right now, actually.
Could be.
Okay, so Uxbridge and Scugog did an alteration to their bylaws, and one of the things they defined for a clean fill dump site was that a commercial fill operation means the placing or dumping of fill involving remuneration paid or any other form of consideration provided to the owner or occupier of the land, whether or not the remuneration is consideration provided to the owner for the sole reason of placing or dumping the fill. So what we're talking about is a commercial dump site we're going to put in back. That's what it says. And these people have gone since then and altered their plans to adjust to this. Why are they doing it? You may not know, but the GTA generates about 25 million cubic meters of fill every year. That's what comes out of Toronto. 16 Rogers centers. Ballpark, and I might be wrong with my numbers, but they're pretty close. $150 a truck dumping fee. Let's say you're a big dump site, you do 300 trucks a day, 240 working days, you're looking at $10 million a year. This is a huge business. If you read some of the later news reports from 2018, they call it the black market of clean fill. And I'm quite happy to provide them to your staff. Port Colborne is going to get, and I'm not saying that Port Colborne Quarries is going to get that level of money out of it, but certainly it'll be more than enough to pay for the $1,420 permit fee. Municipalities close to the GTA are tightening up their bylaws. That's where all these previous things, they are really tightening up. Does this mean we could get soil from the new waterfront development in Toronto? And I'm sure that's lovely clean soil. But we could get fill from that. They're going to need a place to put that, and that's going to be developed. This is a nice, clean landfill in the northeast of the GTA, just so anybody understands what a clean landfill looks like. This is a clean one. So, yeah. Okay. The survey of municipal soil bylaws on March 2013, Port Colborne was in it. We got surveyed for that. The Port Colborne bylaw written in 2010 only references the EPA, falls short of recommendations from the survey. There's no reference to the MOE Regulation 153.35 153/04, and by the way, thank you for having it in yours. It was nice to see it in the new submission from Port Colborne Quarry. But our current bylaw exempts quarries and pits from compliance. They don't have to comply with the bylaws in our current bylaw. The recommendation from the survey, from our own ongoing research, it appears that municipalities located nearest to Toronto area have developed site alteration bylaws governing the placement of soil. However, most site alteration bylaws not specifically reference the MOE reg criteria tables to define soil quality criteria, and municipalities further away from the immediate GTA area appear to be slower to adopt a fill bylaw as disposal was not posed a significant issue. So we've been down here in the dark to what's been going on north and east of Toronto. These are a list of sites that are currently experiencing problems. Scugog, Otonabee, Morgan's Road, Side Road 14, contaminated soil, and then you get into Cumsey with no permit, compliance issues with overfilling, a lot of that going on. And that's only a partial list. And this is one, if you notice the Scugog, this is February 14th or 19th, 2019. The Scugog still is causing them a problem with the site, and that was shut down in 2010. They have a $200,000 hold on that site from the owner of it, and they're holding on to that money. And that entire article is on my stick. So Uxbridge and Mono have gone and made changes to their fill bylaws, notwithstanding anything else contaminated in the bylaw with no person shall cause, permit, or perform a site alteration on any lands which were previously licensed or permitted and used as a pit or quarry. So they're basically said they're not allowing it. And in Mono, the municipalities within trucking distance of the GTA, they've revised and tightened up their fill laws. Mono Council amended its bylaw. They removed their 250 cubic meter limit. They introduced a $2,000 application fee. They've introduced a $20,000 security deposit so they can hire appropriate personnel to review the proposals, plus another $20,000 performance bond to make sure that the companies do as they've said. And on top of that, so that they can do their own monitoring, they're introducing a $2 per cubic meter charge so that they can do their own monitoring of the material coming in so they know it's right. Because they know if they don't, they've got a mess on their hands down the road. As you said, and it doesn't quite show up here, but you can see in the pink, that's our aquifer. My recommendation is you might want to talk to some other municipalities in the area who use that aquifer. It goes beyond Port Colborne. That's all I have to say. Any questions?
Just before you go on, David, what's your address? We need that for the clerk.
Oh, sorry. 2199 Babian Road, Port Colborne.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Councillors? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship, to the presenter. Thank you, sir, for the presentation. Just on your first slide about the 15% contamination. So this or any other quarry being filled, one of the qualifications is that the person sending the fill there, that will be pre-tested by their representative. Mm-hmm. So are what you're saying would be that those pre-cleared, if I can use that loose word, loads will have 15% contamination?
Potentially, yeah. They can't check it. You can't take enough samples from the load to find out. Not only that, if I'm a enterprising contractor in the field trying to get rid of some soil, and I have a pile that's contaminated and a pile that's really clean, if I mix them together, you know what I've got? I've got a pile that will pass the regulation, but I've still got that level of contamination in it.
No, I understand that if you put a load aside that you knew was contaminated, but
that is being done.
Right. So what I'm trying to understand is that this 15% that you claim is there.
Oh, I don't claim is there. I can tell you where it came from.
Figures say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is that definition of contamination?
Yeah, it's a long
Well, I
list.
guess what I'm saying is, it's contamination, it's a load of fill and glasses in it?
No.
It's an inert metal,
We're
it's
talking
something that's
chemicals. We're
dangerous?
talking anything from lead to arsenic to cyanide to, there's an entire list on table 1.
So the solution to that is that every single load that's checked, even if it has 15%, then has to go through another process.
You got to audit. And then you've got to audit the person doing the audit. In the earthworks site, one of the biggest problems they had was that the quality person doing the auditing wasn't keeping proper records, wasn't doing the auditing the right way. They were doing visual looks at the material. When you visually look at a truck of dirt, you can't tell what's in that truck. That's ridiculous.
These other reports that you asked about that had we knowledge of, I take the planner at his word, but I'm wondering if the Ministry of Environment Conservation and Parks would know about those.
They were involved in a lot of those reports, and I've got copies of them.
So they would have regard for that in what they say, their spot testing, all of that stuff. So that policing agency, the MOECP, would be able to pick up on that.
Should be able to.
Okay, great. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter. You presented and gave a lot of information.
That's only part of what I have. I tried to summarize it.
My concern is there was a lot of information there, and I wasn't really clear on what you're asking council for. I just could you give us like a couple, like in a one brief sentence, what exactly it is that you're...
This is too big a decision that affects the future of this municipality and our children and grandchildren in it to make right now. You need to study it, you need to understand it, you need to talk to the other municipalities that are deeply involved in it and having these problems before you come to any conclusions. This is a huge issue. It's an issue that is only coming into these municipalities here because of the fact that the municipalities around Toronto up to Hamilton are shutting their doors to this type of material, and it's only going to get worse.
Councillor?
And it also sounded like, because you were referencing bylaws, are you asking that we look into changing our bylaws?
Oh, your bylaws are totally out of date.
Or is, yeah, because there's a lot of things you hit on, but I'm just trying to figure out exactly what it is that you want from us and how that relates to this item in particular.
The Ontario Task Force on Soil Management submitted and made recommendations on bylaw formats, and there's rationale behind those discussions, and there's templates for those bylaws on the stick that they provide, and they provided it to the municipalities in Ontario based on their studies of how you should construct a bylaw to address this clear issue of clean fill. And I address this as called clean fill. But any time, unless it's 100% clean, that you have contaminants in it and you have to measure it, you can't measure it all. And I know, and just to give you some background on myself.
I'll wait to the end.
I was 40 years as an engineer. I'm still working as an engineer, although I'm supposed to be retired. I cleaned up foundries, returned them to habitats for nature, cleaned up industrial sites, redone industrial sites. There's a lot of work to be done before you get into this type of thing. There's a lot of thought.
Okay, Council?
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Our third speaker is Jack Kalinga.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, those present, neighbors, and staff. You might be surprised to hear that my very first comment is this could be good. It could even be great, but only if it's done right. I'd like to thank IBI for the comments they made in their review of questions that Mr. Wells and I presented back in October, where they said that all those questions were really great questions, and they're questions that should be asked by the neighbors. Unfortunately, I don't believe, I went through the council package, I couldn't find the response to most of my comments. They did go through and comment on all of the PowerPoint, but mine was not a PowerPoint presentation. I did, as soon as I found out that this was on the agenda for tonight, I sent to all the councillors those questions that I presented back then, along with a few more, a bit of an analysis of the responses that I had gotten since that time. And I still have concerns. Firstly, on page 60 of the council package, IBI has a statement, again, which I agree with. Surprising, but not. However, this is a quote, "There was no request by city staff, nor is there any meaningful purpose from a planning perspective at this stage to look at yet land use impacts for a future industrial land use that isn't anticipated for another 20 years. So one of my comments was that industrial uses in the future should not even be in the discussion or into any of the reports that were presented with a site alteration permit application. I also suggested that there be a bond or some security presented, given to the city to ensure that they had something to collect on if things didn't meet all of the requirements of the permit. And the comment was that we were asking for something that, or this suggestion was something that nobody else has to do. However, Mr. Henderson referred to the Ontario Soil Remediation Task Force. They have a template for a letter of credit for this particular purpose. So it isn't just something that I dreamed up. It actually is a recommendation of an official task force, which is in direct contact with municipalities on a constant basis. I'm also happy to see that because of the comments that we made in the other times that this came up to council, that a subsequent report was submitted by Golder Associates, and with its numerous references to the Ontario regulations and 153/04. I've got a question for Mr. DeRoche, and that is regarding the levels of the SAR and EC. As I understand the fill regulations, Table 1 must be met except below 1.5 meters, there's an exemption for SAR and EC. But this particular site is actually 7 meters into a high vulnerable aquifer. So is it appropriate to put materials that aren't suitable within the top 1.5 meters because what they could release out, but they are acceptable within a high vulnerable aquifer? Because SAR and AC, if you test SAR, SAR is often road salts. Road salts are not table salts. They don't contain iodine. They can even be cyanide salts. and contain boron. So is it appropriate to put those within the high and vulnerable aquifer? Should it not meet Table 1 completely for everything within the aquifer and within the 1.5 meters, and only be outside the Table 1 within that boundary between the two? There's also a little question as to the bonds and the fees. Mr. Henderson showed where other municipalities are charging an application fee, holdings so that the city can monitor, $20,000 for another charge. And this recommendation is for a single fee of $1,420, which is barely enough to send a staff member out to look at a dust complaint. There's going to be, their numbers, 14.1 million tons of material coming into this site. Let's stretch it and say 20 tons per truck. 700,000 trucks over a 20-year period. 20 years, 52 weeks a year, 1,000 weeks, 700,000 trucks in 1,000 weeks, 700 trucks per week. And you're going to monitor it for $1,420 over 20 years. I don't think the numbers add up. A secondary plan, as the IBI representative presented, on a site for future development of some kind. Pit 1, by the way, is residential on the north, rural residential on the north, residential development on the west, Snyder Road residential, and the Pit 2 currently rehabilitation plan for passive recreation, and the south side partly residential, partly light industrial. And on page 60 again, the IBI report. Secondly, when we initially talked to city staff about submitting a site alteration permit, they asked Port Colborne Quarries to respond to a very specific question, which essentially was, once the site is backfilled, and if someday the lands were to be used for some form of industrial use, would that use be compatible with the proposed passive lake rehabilitation design? It's more than being compatible with a passive recreation lake. It is compatibility with what is proposed and currently in existence around that site. That is Pit 1. That's where the compatibility should extend. I don't know about a secondary plan for any type of infrastructure on 50 feet of fill. I don't think you're going to find anybody in the development field willing to put infrastructure on fill when the bottom 7 meters of that fill becomes saturated again when the water table comes back up. But maybe you could invest in piles 50 feet down into the rock, but I question whether or not that's economically viable. As I say, that would be up to a developer, but I think the developer should ask before a secondary plan is worth developing. That's the extent of my presentation. Willing to answer any questions, or maybe somebody from IBI or Golders would like to respond to.
Thanks, Jack. Just your address. I know we know who you are, but just your address for the clerk, please.
Sorry, yes, Jack Halinga, 770 Highway 3, Port Colborne.
Council, any questions? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Hlingo, for the report and your pragmatic look at this. I'm just wondering, the item, the amendment tonight, the offer by the proponent to also look at rules that might change over the years to be included. I'm wondering if you had any issue with that.
Well, as you may have, you had a lot of reading to do on the weekend, but I had submitted a number of suggestions for amending the bylaw for tonight, or the conditions in that bylaw. In my opinion, and I would ask the Golder representative to indicate whether that was unreasonable, but saying that that regulation may occur in 2 to 3 years, in 2 to 3 years, we may have high SAR within the water table. And that, I would suggest that that be included right now, that table 1 is table 1. SAR and EC from outside that table, no.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Jack.
No more? Thank you.
You want to question the first presenter? Yeah. Yeah. Could David and Steve come back up? There's a question from a councillor. Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenters. Our first presenter, no, sorry, our second presenter after you, mentioned something about 15% contamination infill. What is your response to that? Are you going to be applying? Are you going to be? Is the infill going to meet that standard? Is it going to? I just want a little bit more of an explanation.
Well, I must admit, firstly, I don't know where that 15% came from. Certainly, if the presenter does have some information that can support that, we'd be happy to look at it. In terms of the testing frequency, I mean, the ministry is very well aware of these sites. They are very aware of the issues that it's caused for municipalities, and in response, they have prepared the proposed excess soil regulation, which is not in effect yet, but we've actually, in this plan, adhered to their testing requirements that could come into effect. And this is being done on a voluntary basis right now. The testing procedures and the frequency that are being specified here are also consistent with what the ministry would require for importation of fill where future development is going to include sensitive uses. Like, for example, record of site condition sites where you're going to be building parklands or residential. We're adhering to that same testing frequency, and in many cases, we're specifying a more stringent standard than those would require.
Councillor Colella?
Would you be willing, I'm sure you've looked at the points that Mr. Halinga has put forward and had a chance to look at them all. Would you be willing, as you move forward in this process, to adhere to additional regulations as they came forward, to always keep current with them as you went through this process?
And certainly, you know, the fail-safe in this whole thing is that this is always going to be subject to the Environmental Protection Act, right? Mm-hmm. And if somebody's not adhering to this plan, the ministry can issue an order and say, stop importation or to remediate. Because in that case, if the plan's not being followed, it's an unregulated waste management activity in the ministry's eyes.
And my second question is, you must have an opinion regarding the fee charges, because I understand what they're saying. The cost to send someone out from the city to do those kinds of testing and everything, $1,400 doesn't seem like, and it would never cover the costs involved. Are you open to what he's suggesting for fee charges? Is this something that is usually negotiated with the city, or how does that work?
We typically haven't seen a municipality conduct its own testing. I know other municipalities have had problems with this. The way the plan is structured is that the tests are required to be completed by a qualified person, a professional engineer or a professional geoscientist who has a duty to work in the public interest. We've asked them to disclose any and all contaminants that they believe may be present, to test for those, and that would be subject to a review by the quarry's qualified person as well to verify that everything's above board and is consistent with the origin of that material. And those records, the intent is to keep those on site so that they are available for audit by the ministry or by another entity who would want to see them.
Okay, Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. Do you know if the quarry will be charging for material brought to the site?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
That's a no.
No. So all the fill that is going in there. So.
Go ahead.
So all the fill that's going into the quarry, it's free for people to bring it in to fill that pit one?
Just a second, Councillor. You want to come up to the podium, please? Yeah. Thanks. Just state your name and who you work for.
Sean Tiley with Rankin Construction, Port Colborne Quarries. To answer your question, Councillor, all the fill that we take in now has no tipping charge to it, and it's for our customers only.
And I guess you can't guarantee whether that'll that'll continue for 20 years or?
I can't forecast the future on that. Certainly. I can tell you what's happening now.
Okay. And that's fine. I think before I use the D word, I think we don't know what we don't know. I've heard some things tonight that this is the first time I've heard them. I've heard that our staff isn't well versed in some of the new things that came forward. Whether that will change anything, I don't know. But this is a long-term commitment as soon as we say go. And while many of us think this will be a great thing and an opportunity for everyone, I think we owe it to the population of Port Colborne that's here now and will be here in 20 years when this is possibly filled, to say we did all the due diligence, have all the right rules in place, and that we actually know what we're voting on and what we're giving the okay to the quarry, to do this. And I'm not sure we're quite there yet. And I know some people say, well, you've been looking at this for a long time, but you know what? There's new things coming forward even at this meeting. So I, for one, want to make sure we're totally up on everything. We've heard experiences of other municipalities. That worries me. I want to make sure we got it right. Is our bylaw right? Are we doing everything not to be one of those municipalities that show up on a list of one that's got problems, that somebody else is looking at this in the future? So I'm not going to say the D word yet, because maybe somebody else will want to talk on this, and I think everyone should have a kick at this can. So I'll just wait and see if any other councillors have something to say.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I am a little bit concerned, or very concerned, with regards to the site the permit fee of $1,420, considering Mr. Halinga's comments, and I would just like to hear what your thoughts on that are.
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais. When the fee actually was structured, that was a fee that was established in 2010. And it was based on the actual size of a property. There's no other applications that have been approved that are of the size of Port Colborne Quarries. So the calculation that I came forward with was based on what the actual existing bylaw is. We heard tonight about looking to have some due diligence done. I'm not an expert in soil contamination. I'm not qualified to do any testing. That would have to be farmed out for a qualified person to do testing. So if the council has concerns about price, to do certain work, then it may be something that the council would want to address in the bylaw for consideration and put in measures to have monies in place to do certain work, if that is the direction for council to have done.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. I would actually like to follow up on that and see that we make an adjustment here to allow for possible costs that we're going to face and to update all of our bylaws and our knowledge base on this whole thing.
Okay, Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to the consultants. I'm just wondering if you could perhaps address these last two comments, but more importantly, any of the other comments you've heard from Mr. Henderson and Mr. Halinga. They brought up some points, and I'd like your take on that.
I can certainly speak to the question about SAR. There's often a bit of a misconception of what SAR and electrical conductivity actually are. They often do associate with salt-related contamination. They don't relate to cyanide or any other regulated contaminants. There's separate standards for those. This notion that we've instituted a condition where there's no standard for SAR below 1.5 meters, that's actually consistent with the Ministry of the Environment standard tables. The reason why there's no standard below 1.5 meters, and even in those cases where groundwater is used for potable supply, if you look at the Ministry's Table 4 standards, there's no value for EC or SAR because the Ministry does not consider them to be contaminants that impact aquifers. The reason why there are standards for them is because they have the potential to impair the growth of certain plants, particularly agricultural crops, which is why those standards are there and why they only apply to that shallow soil where plants root.
Councillor?
Yes, this one through you to Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Aquilina, I think you rightfully said that it's not in our knowledge base, nor do we have staff that could do some of these ongoing things. In the case of a concern from the community, would the city, no matter what the fee would be, would they not be asking the appropriate ministry to do that review and check on it? In other words, do you envision a point where we would take it upon ourselves to challenge the validity of either the tests going in for pre-clearance, or would we not, like in many things, call in the Ministry of Environment to do that, or the Ministry of Natural Resources?
Dan? Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, absolutely yes. I wouldn't rely on my knowledge because I'm not knowledgeable on that. I would then refer to the association or government agency that deals with this matter. So I would consult with the Ministry of the Environment.
Thank you. And just with respect to that, the issue of the fee, I'm not sure why it was set in 210 at that amount, and perhaps you're not either. I don't know if other municipalities have changed that. But certainly fees should be commensurate with our role and our responsibility. And so can you envision any other duties that you or your department would have that would warrant us needing a fee if indeed, if you saw something problematic, you were going to be calling in the ministry?
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. I was involved with the actual bylaw in 2010 that came to council, and when you look at the actual properties that have applied and received permission from myself, they're smaller scale in nature. So the fees themselves are appropriate because the only thing that we usually do if we have compliance matters is something that we deal with internal staff, bylaw staff. If we're going to go to the Ministry of the Environment, that's just a matter of sending information off to them. Does that translate to increased fees? It would take some time to actually put together an email and do some follow-up, so there is some staff time involved. What actually amount would it be? I can't give council an answer what that would be because I don't know what the gist of what would be something that we would be involved with. We know the Ministry of the Environment actually has the regulations in place. We heard from Port Colborne Quarries that they're going to confirm the soil quality on the site, and confirming that it does comply with their regulations. So again, it's a matter of what would be required of myself that would go outside of the Ministry of the Environment, if that can answer your question.
Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. Through you, this is a report that came through your office, but this is site alteration bylaw. In your opinion, if this were to be challenged by either constituent or the proponent, would this be LPAT, or would it be, I guess, the Superior Court or the court?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno, this is not a Planning Act application, so something like LPAT wouldn't be involved in the matter. If council was to turn down the application, it would be, assuming, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume it would be something that would be challenged in the courts, upper levels of courts for consideration.
Okay, Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. With that in mind, then, is that part of your analysis for having put forward a recommendation to do this, that they've met all the requirements that you see, notwithstanding it's not a planning issue?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bruno, that is correct. Based on the information that was presented and provided, I felt that I had some comfort with the fact that there was going to be due diligence with the actual soils that were brought in, with an oversight with the Ministry of the Environment. So that was one of the reasons I could support providing the recommendation to Council.
Councillor?
Thanks. And lastly, I just want to say that I think this is one of those issues that has a lot of dimensions to it. In reading back in the report, I mean, the earliest date I saw, it sounds like it could be even earlier, was 2016. I think at some point, one's got to land on a decision. And from my point of view, I think the lens that we look through is the zoning. That's been addressed in terms of a future council, which I don't want to tie their hands to, is going to have that discretion. I think that's a positive. With respect to the residents, I think they need the protections which were alluded to tonight. Having said that, I'm not only buoyed by the fact that they're even taking into consideration the most recent in the report, a year and a half ago, these recommendations. So all the latest and greatest stuff, I guess, for lack of a better word, is in here with respect to the law that's out there. The fact that they've redoubled their effort to say changes to that they will implement as per the amendment for item 2, I'm impressed with. With respect to all of the municipality, this is a proponent that since taking over in the last 10 years has made some pretty dramatic positive changes that I see as average citizen just looking at the skyline and what's out there. At the end of the day, I'm concerned also that when we have contractors and fill leaving our municipality, that the ongoing costs for us, if we do a water, wastewater servicing proposal in the city of Port Colborne, or private developers, are going to need to send it to somewhere. And I'd be a lot happier if it was closer, because that would have a reflection on our price. And finally, at the end of the day, what I don't want to be involved in is a situation, well, sorry, before saying my last point, I am concerned that on the issue of the fee, but I've now been reassured by Mr. Aquilina, because I don't think we will ever know all there is to need to know in this science. That's not the business we're in, and I don't think we'll have the expertise to check it. That, at some point, I have to rely on the ministry that's in charge of doing that, because I don't think we will ever be able to keep up with the changing rules and regulations surrounding the environment. And finally, I don't see a path forward where we have a recommendation before us that is approved by our planner, talks about future changes in environmental legislation, and is subject to pre-testing, spot testing by the MOE. And at that basis, I'm not willing to look at putting the municipality at a risk that now sounds like it's not LPAT, but might be the court system, that we will be defending when it appears to me we're really under the rules of the MOE. And from that point, I'm willing to support this recommendation that the Planning Department has put forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. You may have answered this, but I'm not sure I heard everything. So what if the SARS or the EC contamination fill was placed near the bottom of the quarry, right on top of the aquifer? Did you allude to that in one of your questions?
Certainly, if you look at the Ministry of the Environment's tables beyond Table 1, so Table 1 is the background standard, saying this is the background condition in Ontario, and that's what the quarry has indicated that they will adhere to. Beyond that, if you look at, for example, Table 4, which applies in a stratified condition where an aquifer is being used for drinking water supply, below 1.5 meters, the ministry says there's no value for SAR. They don't consider that it would impact an aquifer in that case. The only reason why the standard is there is to protect future plant growth in that surface soil.
Okay. And further, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Just to pick up on something Councillor Bruno said, that certainly Mr. Rankin's there. I think we have a certain comfort level. Senior staff at the quarry, we have a council, a comfort level with them. God forbid Mr. Rankin steps out and gets hit by a bus. Senior staff get headhunted by another company, and the quarry sold to someone that may not have that same high standard. I think we need to have this right. We can't say that everything, ownership and everything in the quarry is going to remain the same. So again, I come back to the fact that we've heard some stuff here tonight that, maybe some of those municipalities that are having trouble thought they had the latest and greatest coverage, at everything that was done, and all of a sudden they didn't. So, we'll never get it perfect, but we really need to get it as right as we can. So I'll still wait for other comments.
Thank you. Councillor Clayla.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Aquilina. There were a lot of questions and things that you were unaware of tonight, different regulations and that. Given everything you heard tonight, you recommended this to go through a while ago. Given everything that you heard tonight at this point with what's going on, would you still stand behind those recommendations, or would you be willing to say we should be looking at this a little bit further like Mr. Bodnar says?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor to the councillor, the fact that we have qualified individuals before us this evening that are talking about the actual requirements from the ministry and the soil parameters that they have to follow and the ministry has to follow, as well as Port Colborne Quarries has to follow, I have comfort with the record.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is somewhat overwhelming. I would like to see maybe make a recommendation that maybe Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Boggs sit down with
meet with the other group. Is there a possibility to have
Well,
a conversation between them?
We can, but there is a motion to defer, so that's
Okay.
a little separate with regards to the deferral. There's no debate on the deferral, but you can ask a question as far as timeline, and that's about it right now. And reason and timeline is the only two questions you can ask. Yes.
So, in regards to reason, what else can we really do moving forward within our jurisdiction of the municipality of Port Colborne as powers, on this particular issue? So my question really is that if we can't really do much more, then should we really defer it? That's my
until you said the end. The reason the councillor is giving is he wants some more information with regards to questions that were asked this evening. So that is his reason. There hasn't been given a timeline as of yet. question.
I could answer quite clearly what we could do.
Well, that's not up for that, but I think we understand what Councillor Bodnar is bringing forward with regards to those questions. So I mean, that's the reason why I brought it forward. Councillor, is there a timeline?
Look, I know we need to move ahead with this at some point, but, you know, I'm not going to tell staff to, you know, knock something off in a short time and not do the due diligence to get it right. So,
Through to Dan?
Yeah, Colleen.
I mean, for what was asked by the councillor with regards to timelines?
Through Mr. Mayor to all of council, the fact that you want me to look at all the questions that were raised tonight and then bring something back to council, that's not going to be done at the next council meeting because I have to have the report done by Friday, and that's not happening.
So you're talking April?
Sometime in April.
Thank you, councillor. Okay. We have a deferral motion on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? You voted in favor, councillor? Okay, that's carried then. Well, actually, no. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, sorry. Yeah. 4. 4 went for. Harry can't vote.
Yeah, right. So there's Frank's on here.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just making sure the numbers are right. Yes. So, yeah, 4-3. Yeah. Okay. So then this is deferred at this time. So Dan, April. Okay. All right. Proponent, it is deferred till approximately April. So I know Dan will be in contact with you guys between now and then. Correct, Dan? All right. Thank you.
Late hand.
Oh. Okay, item 7. Councillor Clayliff. Item 7. I suggest Dan adds that. Ready, Councillor?
I just had a question regarding the
Oh,
property.
you got to put it on the floor first, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Planning and Development Department, Planning Division Report 21920, subject sale of a part of Kinnear Park.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Clayliff.
I just had a question regarding it. Was the purpose of the sale, was it land that we didn't need, or was it's obviously adjacent to this property? I just wondered about the details for it.
Staff?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Clayliff, there was a request to purchase this particular property. It went to council, the previous council in closed session.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor?
Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Briggs. Is this land, has this been considered in the Parks and Recreation strategy?
Staff?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if these lands would have been considered as part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, yes. Staff, after having received the agenda, took a look at this report, and I conversed with them to confirm that there were no concerns on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Division, and we're satisfied with that.
Okay. Any more questions? All in favor? That's carried. Item 9, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. This is Vance Battleway, Member of Parliament, Niagara Centre, interim report on establishing a Canadian transportation and logistics strategy.
Seconder, Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I brought this forward for a couple of reasons, and actually the next item too. I know through the past term of council and at a more rapid rate, we've been looking at this transportation strategy, at how it might affect us, particularly with Mid-Penn and particularly with the canal front lands. To that end, I felt it deserved some highlighting here. I did want to put forward, rather than just receiving it as information, to put some emphasis behind it. So I came up with a short recommendation or motion that under the interim report on establishing a Canadian transportation and logistics strategy, Port Colborne will identify capital requirements and consider making an application under the National Trade Corridor Fund, NTCF, for appropriate city projects which support the recommendations contained within the report, and will work with our local and Southwestern Ontario partners, stakeholders, and users and municipalities excuse me, to strengthen the Niagara-Hamilton economic cluster. And I gleaned that from the report, Council. So I'd like to put some emphasis that we support this recommendation.
Okay. Take it as an amendment. So this is only to receive. So it's an amendment to move it from just receiving it to actually doing action. Can I have a seconder to that? Councillor Desmarais. Any questions to what Councillor Bruno put on the floor? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bruno. Councillor Bruno, I would assume from what you've put forward that you're specifically speaking of the downtown CIP. Is that one of the pieces
actually,
you were talking about? Or
great question. Any and all initiatives that we want to bring forward that fall under the purview of this act, I think would be appropriate. So definitely the CIP.
That's wonderful, yes, because I have had public inquiries about the importance of the CIP to this council, to the downtown CIP to this council. So that's good. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor. Item 10 actually touches on that even at a greater level, which I know Councillor Bruno will be speaking about. Any other questions to Councillor Bruno? Councillor Bodner?
Just a comment that you'll see in there that this also mentions the elusive Mid-Peninsula Corridor, too. Yes. That certainly, when I was mayor, I made a joke, I hope I still have my driver's license when they build this, and it's getting closer, so somebody better build the darn thing. So thanks.
Sounds like other projects that are deferred a lot. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First a question, then a comment. So Councillor Bruno's, his motion, we don't okay the whole, 31 recommendations, because it is an interim report. We're just going on his to deal with Port Colborne and out of that report.
No, I think what Councillor Bruno is saying, that we do the whole report, but those are very important from that report, that they directly involve us. They all involve us, but those probably for greater reasons than others. So it is the whole report that we're supporting.
Okay. And in just the comment here, the note that the attachment is available at the clerk's office. It was not available.
It's online, and it was sent to you.
As of 9 o'clock this morning, it was not online.
It is.
It's online. Sorry, but it is online, and it was sent to all councillors on Friday afternoon by the CAO.
I'm talking about for the general public.
It's online.
Yeah, it wasn't there that.
It's online.
It actually is. I'll show you.
Yeah. You want to show him that, councillor, please? Because he can't work his computer. Any other councillors or councillors? Any other questions, councillors?
Somebody walking in downstairs could get it. They have to run on to get it.
Seeing none.
That's the only way you could get it. But it's available to view.
So on this meeting, guys, the amendment to item number 9 that Councillor Bruno brought forward, we're voting on the amendment first. All those in favor? That's carried. With regards to the amendment or the motion as amended, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Very good. Item number 10, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Vance Bedaway, Member of Parliament, Niagara Centre, Canada, Ontario bilateral agreement.
Second, go ahead.
Sorry. If the correspondence received from Vance Bedaway, Member of Parliament, Niagara Centre, Canada, Ontario bilateral agreement be received for information, I want to bring forward.
Seconder on that, Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Specific to both Councillor Bodner and Councillor Demery's point, this is the part that gets down to the real world and the nitty gritty. From my understanding of reading this, the members put forward, I believe it's 5 projects. In our case, it was the CIP. And that is awaiting the province giving direction to municipalities that they can apply under certain intakes. And that has not happened.
Correct.
So the federal government has capital money to spend in Ontario, and it needs some approvals from the Ontario government. So put forward the following. The Ontario government must recognize the importance of job creation in contributing to local capital needs that are vital to communities across Niagara and the province. Therefore, we ask that the provincial government commit to a 3-year infrastructure plan and open the intake for funding streams that will allow us to receive needed capital funding for projects within the city of Port Colborne and Niagara. So if you read in the detail of this, there are other projects for Welland, Thorold, and I'm not sure where else. Maybe
the region.
The region, thank you. So this is just to suggest to the province, get your skates on, we want the money, give us the application, we can apply.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have, an amendment to the motion. Councillor Bodner. Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? So this one will go to the province as well as back to our MP and the Federal Minister of Infrastructure, Francois Philippe Champagne.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
All right. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, councillor, for bringing those forward. Both Councillor Bruno and I had lots of discussion on those two, and just receiving them just wasn't cutting it for the two of us. So we worked on those two. But those are 2 great reports that our MP brought forward to us. So that being said, any notices of motion this evening? Notices of motion. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Wells. All those in favor? That's carried. I'll call this meeting to order. Introduction of addendum items. Mr. Clerk.
None this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Confirmation of agenda, mover and seconder, Councillor Wells, Councillor Bruno, all in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest. Councillor Wells.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a pecuniary conflict of interest on this.
On item 6. Item 6.
That's correct, on item
Okay.
6.
Thank you. Adoption of minutes, regular meeting of council, 04-19, held on February 25th, 2019. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Bagu, Councillor Wells. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Any items requiring separate discussion? Councillor?
So because item 6 is deferred, we don't have to.
Deferral comes forward. We don't vote on it.
Right.
Oh, you can vote on it again, but it's the same.
No.
It's the deferral you vote on.
For Councillor Wells' conflict,
You
we
can
don't.
draw that out, yes.
Yeah?
Yes, you can.
Okay,
You'll do that.
I'll bring it up.
Thank you.
If I want to, Mr. Mayor.
Right now, you don't have a choice, Councillor Bodner. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Or sorry, approval of items not requiring separate discussion. All those in favor? Okay, now item 6, Councillor Bodner.
Do I have to?
You just read the top.
Make a motion?
No, you just have to read the top.
Okay.
That's all.
Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report Number 2019-14, subject Site Alteration Permit, Port Colborne Quarries.
Okay, seconder to that, Councillor Beauregard. Any questions? All those in favor? Taking in Councillor's
Well,
conflict?
yeah, but we deferred it, so how are we voting on it now?
It's a deferral, yeah.
We're in favor of the deferral, yes.
No, well, yeah, you're in favor of what's coming out of committee, which is the deferral.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to vote on this for the councillor's conflict. That's why it's brought forward again. Yeah.
You said all in favor, I thought, well, not a motion, but.
I think maybe if I can read Councillor Bodner's mind, so is it appropriate to vote it as just we're receiving that, or are we to mimic the vote that we had in committee?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we're voting.
What's that?
For the deferral.
Which is for a deferral.
So, fine, okay.
Yeah,
I answered it.
committee has changed the motion. That's what is brought forward. So the original motion is off the sheet and a deferral is on the sheet. That's how it comes forward. Okay? Should I make good clerks up here? Okay. Proclamations, there are none. There's one, minutes of boards, commissions, and committees, minutes of the Port Colborne Historical Marine Museum Board of Management, meeting of January 15th, 2019. I don't think Councillor Bruno can vote on this one.
Did you vote on the...
Item 6, yeah.
You didn't do the...
Yes. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I took the vote, and then you asked a question. Okay, I can do it again if you want. Well, it's passed.
If it's passed.
It's passed. It's done. It was passed. We did that. Anyways, on the Historical Marine Museum minutes, all those in favor, or sorry, mover and seconder, Bodner, Beauregard, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Consideration of bylaws. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a number of bylaws this evening, and I'll
do them in block
so that council can approve them. It's bylaw number 6651-1519, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an amending agreement. Number 1, to the Public Infrastructure Fund, Phase 1, transfer payment agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario as represented by the Ministry of Transportation for the Province of Ontario. Bylaw 6652-1619, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6530-9717, being a bylaw to establish a committee known as the Port Colborne Social Determinants of Health Advisory Committee, Everyone Matters. Bylaw 6653-1719, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Circle P Paving, Retender 2013-09, annual asphalt patching contract extension. Bylaw 6654-1819, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with CTC Contracting, Tender 2015-10, annual concrete sidewalk construction contract extension. Bylaw 6655-1919, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Rankin Construction, Tender 2015-11, annual asphalt resurfacing contract extension. Bylaw 6656-2019, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with the Greenfield Group, Tender 2015-04, citywide grass mowing contract extension. Bylaw number 6657-2119, being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with Bruce and Leslie Bitterman, respecting part of Block 0, Plan 775, being Part 1 on Plan 59R 16309. And bylaw 6658-2219, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation City Port Colborne at its regular meeting of March 11th, 2019.
Mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Demeray, any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Bruno, all in favor? That's carried.